In the coming 3 weeks, we will come to the last module, Module 3. In the first part, we will focus on guidelines for supporting country-level data analysis and reporting for core indicators. Before we get started, let's stop the video and think about these questions. What should we take into consideration when reporting data analysis? What are the most useful reporting tools for collecting data? How should the data results be presented and interpreted? After reviewing the data collection tools to collect data for the monitoring and evaluation of indicators on comprehensive sexuality education, including HIV education in Module 2, we will now focus on the quality of country-level data analysis and reporting for core indicators in Module 3. Step-by-step guidelines will be provided for analyzing, reporting, and writing on the current state and the progress of the delivery of comprehensive HIV and sexuality education. The initial steps consist of filling dummy tables that have been designed to ensure consistency with UNESCO's global guidelines and the comparability of results. These are followed by indications in presenting, describing, and interpreting the results. The suggestions in making policy recommendations are offered with some hints in the final steps. Upon completion of this presentation, you will be able to present the data from core indicators in tables, interpret and analyze the delivery of comprehensive HIV and sexuality education, and translate the analysis results into policy suggestions. First, let's say how to write about core indicators. To complete the whole writing process, it requires 9 steps in analyzing, presenting, and writing about the UNESCO core global indicators. The first step consists of preparing a set of materials for use in the analysis and reporting phase and generating the core indicators. You need to print the UNESCO's global guidelines. The indicators should be processed according to the detailed description provided under method of measurement in UNESCO's global guidelines. Hence, it is suggested to print a copy of these guidelines. You also need to print this module with the dummy tables. The dummy tables are designed to report the core indicators for which data should be collected through the education sector according to UNESCO's global guidelines. These will guide the readers in analyzing data properly. For example, what is a unit of analysis, years of analysis, levels of analysis, what are the required descriptive statistics, etc. And you should generate the core indicators. The core indicators must be processed according to the method of measurement described in the UNESCO global guidelines and the dummy tables presented in this module. It is also important to generate these results according to the disaggregation specified under data disaggregation and reflected in the dummy tables. Some of these indicators can be obtained directly from responses to variables. However, the calculation for most of the indicators requires considering and computing a set of variables. The second step is to present the results of data analysis of the indicators in the dummy tables. The dummy tables employ a systematic approach in data analysis and reporting, as they outline how the results should be conveyed to the target audience in an organized, effective, and user-friendly way. Dummy tables were specifically developed to present descriptive statistics, such as percentage, in a simple and precise format, and to provide time points of comparison for the analysis of the delivery of comprehensive HIV and sexuality education. The dummy tables for reporting the core indicators are proposed in the training material for Module 3, Section B. When reporting results for additional indicators relevant to the country context, it is recommended to use the same dummy table template to guarantee the overall consistency of the presented indicators. The main characteristics of dummy tables are as follows. A breakdown by time periods in columns has been proposed in order to observe the trends of the core indicators between two time periods, year X and year Y. If the total number vary for the same period, then they should appear in a note below the table. If data is available, the trends can be displayed for several years. If data is available for 1 year only, the results should only be presented for year X or year Y. For table with data available for several years, the last two columns are used to report the common measures on evolution between two periods of time that are the absolute gap and the relative gap. Disaggregation by subgroups in rows has also been established in line with UNESCO's global guidelines. It aims to identify differences or inequalities between subgroups that may require different education strategies. Therefore, the disaggregation categories should not be modified. In addition, educational region has been proposed to better present the results and identify possible variations across the regions. Some disaggregation variables, such as regions in brackets, indicate that these variables must be filled with the corresponding variable name. For all tables, country in brackets should be filled with the name of country in the last row, and the national estimates, as a part of the important figures, should be reported in boldface. As recommended in UNESCO's global guidelines, the desired target of the core indicator is reported at the bottom of the table. It is also recommended to mention first the national target with the year if established to be more realistic to the country context, and second, the regional targets with the year, such as ESA accountability framework, if the country is committed to. In order to ensure comparability of indicators, the dummy tables should not be modified. When data collected from a sample of students, for instance indicator 6, or a sample of schools, like indicators 3 and 12, through a school-based survey, each descriptive statistics based on sample survey estimates of the dummy tables must be interpreted in association with its sampling error, SE. The SE gives an indication of the accuracy of the estimate and therefore reflects the level of confidence one can have on interpretations. If a sample is designed carefully, the SEs can be accurately measured and kept to a minimum. The absolute difference is statistically significant only if test of statistical significance of the difference is conducted. The significant gap can be indicated by asterisks with a level of significance, for example 95%, in the note of the dummy table. The third step is to present the results. For each table filled out, you should write narrative paragraphs by presenting the indicators as follows. Clearly state the purpose of the table and identify the unit of analysis. Is it schools, educational institutions, students, or teachers? And then guide the reader on the data in the table to ensure clear comprehension of the figures by the reader. Precisely, you have to present statistics in the column headings, captures the categories and statistics of the indicators being analyzed. Structure of the tabulations presents the results of the data analysis that focus on the indicator and includes information at national level and by disaggregation categories. The fourth description process of results should begin at the national level by analyzing the level of the national figure for the indicator. Are there any extreme highs and lows in the data? Comparing results to desired national targets. Are the target reached in year X and year Y? If not, how far were the results from the target? To draw attention to key results such as desired national targets, you can use boldface, borders, or colors. For example, The value that reaches the target can be reported in green, and the value that does not reach the target can be reported in red. The same process in describing the results should be undertaken by disaggregation subgroups. Are the results the same across subgroups? If not, what is the relative difference between the subgroups? In describing and interpreting values, you should always remember that the descriptive statistics were presented for the unit of analysis of the indicator that differs from one indicator to another. After that, in step 5, when describing the results, you should also describe changes over time. Have the results increased, decreased, or stagnated between year X and year Y? If there are changes, how much progress has been made between year X and year Y? In the dummy table, 2 measures are proposed in the last 2 columns to analyze the trends of an indicator between 2 periods of time. The absolute growth or absolute gap that gives the simple difference over time, and the relative growth rate or relative gap that gives the magnitude of the difference over time. Further information on these measures are provided in the following presentation, Module 3, Part 2, on analyzing changes over time. If data is available for 1 year only, then move directly to Step 6. In Step 6, you need to interpret the results. For each core indicator, the global guidelines includes a section that provides further explanation which should help in interpreting each indicator and any potential issues related to it. It provides additional information about the value of a particular indicator. You should carefully review this section before beginning the interpretation of the data. Data interpretation based on the results presented in Step 4 and 5 is a process of making sense of the information. It enables us to ask, what does this result tell me about the program? You need to use either local knowledge or other forms of sound evidence. It is important to interpret research results in the light of local political, social, and cultural context in which the results are observed. Since the results indicate that actions need to be taken, you need to prepare one or more suggestions in Step 7 for evidence-based policies based on the tabulated results, say Step 3 and 4, and their interpretations, say Step 5 and 6. Some hints for making suggestions for evidence-based policies are proposed below. Hint 1. Suggestions for evidence-based policies must have the following structure. The responsible person or unit in the ministry should specific action. For example, the Directorate of Program Quality Assurance, in conjunction with Planning Division and the HIV and AIDS Management Division, should establish a task force consisting of experienced teachers in order to examine the provision and content of life skills-based HIV and sexuality education at secondary level. We can find the lead units are the directorates of PQA, PD, and HMD. Time frame is medium term, meaning that it can be implemented within 1 or 2 years. For estimated costs, there's nothing. Hint 2. Do not feel obliged to make a suggestion for evidence-based policies for every result presented. Instead, make a policy suggestion only if you feel it is appropriate and that it can be supported by evidence. On the other hand, if you consider that a table warrants several policy suggestions, then don't be afraid of doing so. Hint 3. Do not make suggestions for evidence-based policies that seem to appear from out of the blue. Try to base them on the evidence presented or on local knowledge or on previous research. Hint 4. Do not make wild and unrealistic policy suggestions. For example, the ministry should ensure that at least 120 hours of life skills-based HIV and sexuality education are provided to students at secondary school. Hint 5. If there are existing policies, countries should look for policies or suggestions that were ignored by the ministry. For example, If a policy called for improved bursary support for OVC through school-based programs, but the trend analysis showed that there was no improvement in providing free support to OVC, then you should point this out. Hint 6. Try to avoid overuse of suggestions for evidence-based policies where the ministry or the government is named as the responsible person or unit. This is far too general, and therefore making such policy suggestions easy to be ignored. Instead, be more specific so that pressure is placed directly on the unit, division, section, or person within the Ministry of Education that needs to take action. Hint 7. Make sure that you look at the missing values in the tables. You cannot claim that the results from some schools can provide the picture for all schools in the country. Hint 8. Make sure that you look at the sampling errors of the statistics in the tables for which data are collected through a school-based survey for indicators 3, 6, and 12. You cannot claim that there are major differences among regions if these differences are small compared to the sampling errors in the country. Once the table for a particular indicator is examined, you should prepare a summary of 1 or 2 paragraphs in Step 8. This step should provide an overview of Step 3 to 6 for the table presented for the specific indicator and also include proposed recommendations in Step 7. In addition, the results for core indicators grouped into the same thematic area should be examined jointly and reported conjunctly if relevant. It is also recommended to use visual displays to underline important features of key indicators, including tracking progress over time. Tips to identify the relevant graphs and to prepare them, taking into considerations of their readability for the users, are discussed in the instructional PowerPoint presentation for Module 3, Part 3. The final Step 9 concerns the preparation of a plan for disseminating and communicating the results and suggestions within the Ministry of Education to key decision makers. Second part, let's review what we have learned and practice. Here is the dummy table filled with the results for the core indicator 4 on the percentage of schools that provided an orientation process for parents or guardians of students regarding life skills-based HIV and sexuality education programs in schools in the previous academic year in Daughterland in 2010 and 2015. That corresponds to Step 2. Now move to Step 3. Put the video on pause and clearly state the purpose of the table and identify the unit of analysis. Once finished, you can continue to watch the video. You can now check the results in the next slide. Based on the hypothetical data on indicator 4, the narrative paragraph for presenting the results status could read as follows. After, move to Step 4 and 5. Put the video on pause and describe the results at the national level by analyzing the level of the national figure for the indicator. Are there any extreme highs and lows in the data? Comparing results to desired and national targets. Are the targets reached in 2010 and 2015? If not, how far were the results from the target? When describing the results, you should also describe changes over time. Have the results increased, decreased, or stagnated between 2010 and 2015? If there are changes, how much progress has been made between 2010 and 2015? Once finished, you can continue to watch the video. You can now check the results in the next slide. Based on the hypothetical data on indicator 4, the narrative paragraphs for describing the results status at national level, Step 4, could read as follows. Now start the same process in describing the results by disaggregation subgroups. Are the results the same across subgroups? If not, what is the relative difference between the subgroups? A level of disparity. Put a video on pause and describe these results. Once finished, you can continue to watch the video. You can now check the results in the next slide. Based on the hypothetical data on indicator 4, the narrative paragraphs for describing the results status at disaggregation level, step 4, could read as follows. And the narrative paragraphs for describing the results trends could read as follows. Now move to step 6. Put the video on pause and try to interpret the results that are presented in step 4 and 5. Once finished, you can continue to watch the video. You can now check the results in the next slide. Based on the hypothetical data on indicator 4, the narrative paragraphs for interpreting the results could read as follows. Now move to step 7. Put the video on pause and write 2 policy suggestions on the regional variation and the urban-rural divide in the orientation sessions offered to parents and guardians on life skills-based and sexuality education in Daughterland. Once finished, you can continue to watch the video. You can now check the results in the next slide. Based on the hypothetical data on indicator 4, the narrative paragraphs for policy suggestions could read as follows. Now move to step 8. Put the video on pause and summarize the results and suggestions for evidence-based policies related to the orientation sessions offered to parents and guardians on life skills-based and sexuality education in Daughterland. Once finished, you can continue to watch the video. You can now check the results in the next slide. Based on the hypothetical data on indicator 4, the narrative paragraphs for summarizing results and suggestions for evidence-based policies could read as follows. Finally, let's apply the dummy tables for reporting the core indicators to your group project. Here are the selected 6 internationally recognized indicators to measure the delivery of comprehensive HIV and sexuality education at country level, and for which data should be collected by the education sector. You are now familiar with the steps and the dummy tables. So begin filling out the dummy tables and writing about the core indicators following the 9 steps. Due to the complexity in presenting the results clearly, more than 1 dummy tables are proposed for some indicators. Therefore, you have to choose the one that best describes the situation in a country context. You may wish to include additional indicators to complement the analysis. To guarantee the overall consistency of the indicators presented, you should continue reporting the results with the same dummy table template, say Appendix A. These dummy tables must be analyzed, presented, and written according to the 9 steps provided in Section A. When you have completed this presentation, you can participate in the online discussion forum whenever you are ready to do so. Or you can go to the Instructional Presentation Module 3 Part 2 on analyzing changes over time. Finally, you may wish to access the UNESCO HIV and Health Education Clearinghouse for more resources. Thank you.